Today we are launching a series called The Game. It's about dating and sex. And they say that your system is perfectly designed to achieve the results you've been getting. So if your dating life is 100% what you want it to be, if you have no weird relationships or manipulative relationships or people you are getting burned by, and if there's no carnage and hurt and pain behind you, then you don't need what I'm going to teach. But if your dating life isn't exactly what you want, if you have a little more hurt there than you'd like, or a few less dates than you'd like, then this series is for you. Now, I know some of you are thinking, the question I've been asked even before this started is, well, what about if I'm married? This is on dating, but I'm married. Is this for me? And the truth is, I think you may get more out of this than our singles, because a lot of what I'm going to be teaching is what married people need to live out anyway. See, the point of this series, the message of this series is what all the married people wish they had heard when they were single. Because the problems you have when you are married, when you are single, are the exact same problems you have later when you are married. And so what you're going to notice today in the next 3 weeks leading up to Easter is that you'll see a lot of people nodding when I'm talking. And these are the married people who are agreeing with what I'm saying. These are the married people who've realized that what God said in the Bible is the right way to do it. And they wish they could have figured it out when they were single, and maybe it was 10 years into marriage when they figured it out. Maybe they're divorced, and now they realize if I had done it like that, things might have been different. Now, there is one group that this series won't apply to at all, and so I'm actually going to give you permission to leave in a minute. You can skip these 4 weeks and leave early and come back on Easter. If you have a perfect marriage, you don't need to be here. If you if you have the perfect mate, if you have a deep connection where you share your soul daily with each other, if your sex life is passionate and frequent, if your marriage is something where other people pull you aside randomly in public and say, I can tell your relationship is what I've been looking for my whole life, will you teach me the ways of marriage? Then you don't need to be here. You can just get up and come back in a few weeks. No, really, you can get up. It's cool. Okay, so I love that this series is called The Game because that's what dating is. I mean, you may not want to admit that, but that's what it is. I even remember when I got sick of the game, my wife and I kind of dated, then not, then dated, then not, then dated and got married. And so there was some up and down in there. And I remember one time we had broken up and I was sitting at my parents' house with my siblings. I said, look, will y'all just arrange a marriage for me? And they all kind of laughed. And I was like, no, I'm serious. Like, if you all, as my parents and siblings, can find someone that you will agree on and say, this is who Carl should marry, I will never have had to even met the person. I'll just show up and do it because I obviously have no clue how to do this. And they laughed, but I was kind of serious. But fortunately, that didn't happen because I got Lindsay in the end. But when we date, we have these games we play. And the games go something like this. Like, should I call her to show her I'm interested or should I just text her? Or when he asked me to hang out with his friends, is this like a date or is this like me being his buddy? Or if we're texting each other and I text her last, but she doesn't text me back, what is the proper waiting period before I can text her again to show her I'm interested but not desperate and I want to get to know her, but I'm not stalking her? What about this one? We've gone out a couple times and now it's her birthday. Do I have to buy her something? Or maybe on a more serious level, you had sex with your boyfriend or girlfriend. What does that do to the relationship? Was it an out-of-control moment? Was there liquor involved? What's our status now? And speaking of status, I am thankful I dated pre-Facebook. I know that makes me old, but I am just glad because I don't know the answers to those questions, like when do you update your status on Facebook? What is the appropriate way to flirt on Facebook? And I know, singles, that you stalk your boy or girlfriend to see, what other girls he has pictures of on there and see how his ex-girlfriends are all contacting him. And we even thought of titling this series, It's Complicated, because the reality is that for all of us, this issue of love and relationships and sex is complicated and frustrating. It has some good highs, but it has some low lows. And if you follow Mosaic on Facebook, you even saw some things we were doing to build up this series this week. I'll just show them to you in case you're not following Mosaic yet on Facebook. We put up this picture, and whoever runs it said, this is 21st century dating. And then this one, I live in constant fear of accidentally mentioning something I only know about you because I've stalked you on the internet. And then this one, sure, there are plenty of fish in the sea, but you're not anywhere near the sea. You're in the desert alone. So you're like, yeah, that's funny. So we're going to cover all the general areas of being single, from when you don't have anyone, through dating and sex and marriage. Not necessarily in that order. But this is where it all starts, by talking about finding the right person. This is the biggest problem. So we're going to look today in the next couple weeks at a book of the Bible called Song of Solomon. And one day I really hope we can do a longer series, like maybe 10 or 12 weeks on it, because it has so much to say. We're just going to hit for 3 weeks right now. This book is about sex. In fact, it's so graphic that Jewish boys were not allowed to read this book of the Bible until they were 13 years old. And many people have read this book and said this is about Jesus and the church, to which I would say, I don't think Jesus loves the church like that. I think this is about sex. And the Bible gives us wisdom on money and family and work and sex. And here's why. Because God's a good God. And God wouldn't give us hormones and these bodies and these feelings and parts and say, hey, good luck with that, and leave us on our own. God is a good God. That would be a mean God. And so right in the middle of the Bible, he gives us this book called the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon, that's all about sex. In this book, this couple has sex twice. And it's not like churchy Amish people sex. In fact, he uses animals to describe what's going on in their bedroom. Some new guy's like, this is the church I've been looking for. It is. In this series, we're gonna see what it looks like to desire each other and want each other and then get each other. And I got a decent amount of material for this from a couple friends of mine, Jim Bergen and Scott Nickel. They got a bunch of material from a guy named Tommy Nelson, who I'll quote, but it's good stuff that needs to be shared. God is good. And that's why he gives us this practical book of the Bible. And if we, as a community, will come to God in humility and say, God, I have a trail of brokenness behind me, but I want to listen to you now, then he will transform your dating life so that it results in unity and intimacy and healthy marriage and great sex. So let's get into it. Here's what the Bible says. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 1. This is Solomon's Song of Songs, more wonderful than any other. And this literally translates Solomon's greatest song ever. And if you're maybe vaguely familiar with the Bible, you may know the story of Solomon's father and mother. It was King David, the king of Israel, had an affair with a woman named Bathsheba. She became pregnant, but that son died. But later on, they get married and have another son, and that son is Solomon. And so what we're going to see is a conversation between a man and a woman who desire each other. And the woman talks first. She says, kiss me and kiss me again, for your love is sweeter than wine. And this woman is looking back, remembering her lover. She says, when I think of you, I get drunk on you. Kiss me a lot. And she says, how fragrant your cologne. And that's pretty self-explanatory. You're a good smelling man. You know, we don't have other programming for middle and high schoolers on Sundays. We think this is the environment for you. And so let me just add a tip here. Middle school boys, here's the tip. Start wearing deodorant, okay? Brush your teeth. And girls don't think it's girls don't think it's funny when you fart, okay? If you're 30, girls don't think it's cute when you fart. If you're 80, well, you can't help it if you're 80, so whatever. She says, how fragrant your cologne. Your name is like it's spreading fragrance. She says, I find you physically attractive, but there's something more attractive to me than your looks. It's your name. It's what you're known for. The Greek word caruso is where we get our word character. And the word caruso means to be etched in stone. It's something that can't be changed or easily removed. Character is who you are. And character can go a couple different ways. Character could be honest, gentle, patient, wise, trustworthy. Character could be dishonest, selfish, pouty, arrogant, mean, impatient, bitter, angry. And character is revealed in stress and difficult times and hard times. Who are you when the pressure's on? This woman says, I've been watching you, and you're attractive, but your character's great. She says it's like oil spreading its fragrance. Now, what does that mean? He understood her, because what they would do is they would take olives and they would press it to get the oil. And the very first part of that was taken to the temple and poured out for God. And she's saying, your character is the way it is because God is a priority in your life. You are the way you are because it seems to me your first priority is being a person that honors God. I always take my iPod out when I go running. I always, like if I'm listening to podcasts on a long run, or if I'm going on a short run, I'll listen to like some pump up music, make me run fast or something like that. I don't know. And so one time I synced up my iPod just like a month or so ago, and it said it was done syncing, so I unplugged it, took it out, started running. I was trying to get the songs up as I was running, and the songs I was looking for were not on there. And I was already started, so I wasn't going to turn back and run farther at this point, but I looked and all I could find was easy listening music, and I thought, this is not what I want to go run to right now. But it would have been silly for me to get mad at my iPod and say, you stupid iPod, why are you playing this easy listening music? I wanted some pump up music, come on, because the iPod's just going to play whatever I put on there. And then somehow I'd messed up the sync or something, but an iPod will only play what I had put on there in the first place. So let's take a time out. Ladies, you get to know a guy, and he's great. What song is his life playing? If he doesn't compliment you and treat you right, run. Because if you keep on going, your life will be hell on earth. See, here's the truth. You get married thinking it's all about sex. In fact, I would wonder, when I was engaged to my wife, I wonder how many years we'll be married before we don't have sex every day. Maybe 17, 18 years, something like that. It's 9.5, and I'll let you know, but... See, a lot of you want to skip this week and go to the next couple weeks because you're all about passion. In fact, one of the titles I'm going to preach on in a couple weeks is called Have a Wild Sex Life, and it will be good. But the reason some of you will never get there is because you're not stopping here. Here's the truth. You get married thinking it's all about sex. At least the men do. But after you're married to a person, you don't make love to their body. You make love to their memory. You make love to how they treated you all day, all week, all month. And sin looks really ugly in the dark. So you know what's worse than lying in bed at night alone, wishing you were married to somebody, that you had somebody sharing the bed with you? What's worse than that is lying next to somebody who's wearing the ring that you gave them and gave vows to, but you feel like utter strangers. What's worse than being single is wishing you were. A lot of you have been there. So what song is their life playing? What's their character? Here's why this is important before you get married. Tommy Nelson says it this way. When you get married, you are gambling a huge part of your emotional peace on whether you are wise enough to choose a person of character. Because when you get married, you are taking a .357 Magnum, placing it on your temple, putting the other person's hand on the trigger, and believing that he or she won't pull it because of the kind of person they are. And that's true. Let me say this in kind of a more fun way, lighten it up a little bit. Rick Warren, I follow Rick Warren on Twitter. He's the guy who wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, mega church preacher out in California, great guy. And he tweeted this thing that I saw several months ago that I want to share with you. I'm going to have Jonathan Moynihan read it because he can read it with a little more attitude than I can. But there's a story in the Bible of a woman named Ruth, and who didn't have a husband, and she had found a man named Boaz. And so I've had Christian girls tell me before, well, I'm just Ruth waiting on my Boaz. And I was like, please don't ever say that again. But when knowing that, here's what Rick Warren tweeted.
To all the girls who are in a hurry to have a boyfriend or get married, here's a piece of biblical advice. Ruth patiently waited for her man Boaz. So while you are waiting on your Boaz, don't settle for any of his relatives. Broke ass, po ass, lying ass, cheating ass, dumb ass, drunk ass, cheap ass, locked up ass, good for nothing ass, lazy ass, and especially his third cousin beating your ass. Wait on your Boaz and make sure he respects your ass.
All right. All right, let's get back to the Bible, okay? So here's what the Bible goes on to say. No wonder all the young women love you. I mean, of course, who wouldn't, based on what she said. Take me with you. Come, let's run. The king has brought me into his bedroom. So she won. She got the man. But here's the question: what character is etched in their soul? And here's why this matters. Because a ring doesn't change someone's character. If a man doesn't respect God's boundaries when he's dating, why would he obey that when he's married? It's who he is. And I know some of you are thinking, if I date him long enough, or if I marry him, I can change him. But only God does that, and you let God do that before the wedding, not after. The young woman goes on, says how right people are to adore you. Now she talks about herself. I am dark but beautiful. O women of Jerusalem, I'm dark as the tents of Kedar, dark as the curtains of Solomon's tents. And so she's embarrassed about her skin here. And people who are hearing this knew what she was singing, because the people of Kedar made their tents out of dark animal skin, and the curtains in Solomon's temple were dark purple. She's embarrassed about her skin because it's dark. Now why? Because in every culture, social status is related, a skin tone is related to social status. In the 1800s, if you were white, if you wanted to be pale, because that showed that you had other people to do work in the farm for you. And today, if you're tan, that shows social status because it means you don't have to be cooped up in an office. You can be out by the pool. Even when I was in Indonesia, my friends would use skin cream to make them appear paler than they really were, because in that culture, having paler skin was more attractive. And this woman's embarrassed because she has dark skin, and she goes on to say why. Don't stare at me because I'm dark. The sun's darkened my skin. My brothers were angry with me. They forced me to care for their vineyard, so I couldn't care for myself, my own vineyard. Now, in this culture, a woman was under the authority of her father. And if her father wasn't around, she was under the authority of her brothers. And so her brothers had made her work in the real vineyard and their farm and neglect her own vineyard of her body. And the principle here is she lived under authority, and this reveals her character. Men, is your woman self-centered and vain, or is she willing to work and get her hands dirty? Is there a streak of rebelliousness in her that says, I don't care what anyone else says, I'll do what I want? And this goes both ways, but a ring won't change that. If he or she won't listen to you now, why will they listen to you later? This woman's confident in who she is, and she asks a question. Verse 7, tell me, my love, where are you leading your flock today? Where will you rest your sheep at noon? For why should I wander like a prostitute among your friends and their flocks? Now, in these days, prostitutes would follow shepherds around. So shepherds would, be tending the sheep all day and just kind of following them around to the next pasture or whatever. But at night, when shepherds camped and set up camp and said, we're going to be here for the night, prostitutes would go into the camp and sell their bodies. And she's saying, I know you're a shepherd, but my body's not for sale. Why should I wander around like a prostitute? Does your boyfriend, your girlfriend, the person you're trying to find, treat you like a prostitute? We talked about character. You know when you can really see if someone wants to follow Jesus? It's when it's difficult. See, there's a lot about following Jesus that's easy and makes your life better, and I think you should do whether you believe he's the Son of God or not. But you can see how much someone wants to follow Jesus ultimately when it comes down to a difficult decision. And in our culture, there are two different times where I believe you can see if someone really loves Jesus. One is how they handle their money, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. The second is how they handle this issue of sex. So let's talk about sex. If your boyfriend is saying we should live together before we're married, if your girlfriend is saying, if you loved me, you'd have sex with me, I don't think they love Jesus. I don't think they have Caruso etched on their soul. And I'm not talking about being perfect. The Bible's clear that we all fall short. But when you fall, do you pick yourself up and say, from here on, even though I fall short, I will still follow Jesus? See, many scholars believe that in the Hebrew culture, what made you married was having sex. It wasn't a ceremony, although they had wedding ceremonies sometimes. Having sex was what made you married. So the only people who would have sex and it not count as marriage would be people who are having adultery because they're already married, or prostitutes. And that's why this woman says, you won't treat me like a prostitute. And so I think it's fair to say, ladies, that if he is pressuring you to have sex with him, he's treating you like a prostitute. He's treating you like a whore. Guys, I think it's fair to say biblically that if a woman is pressuring you to have sex with her and you're not married, she's saying, treat me like a slut, treat me like a prostitute. And that's just being real. What's their character? What's their caruso? What's etched on their soul? Today's titled, Find the Right Person, but this is really about you. See, I'm telling you how to find the right person, but the way you find the right person is you be the right person. Andy Stanley phrased it this way. He said, am I the person that the person I'm looking for is looking for? Am I the person that the person I'm looking for is looking for? And when Andy Stanley shared that question in a sermon, he told a story of a single person he had talked to, and this girl explained that she had been raised as a Christian by godly parents, and she had been raised to do the right things for the right reasons, and so she had her course set. It was a course of purity, it was a Christian path, and she had decided this is what I'm going to do. But then she kind of got into college, got in that stage of life where you should meet somebody, and she wasn't really meeting anybody to date, let alone get married to, and then she got out of college, got a job, kind of got in the real world, and her options went way down. She still wasn't finding anybody. And so throughout that process, even beginning in college, she made a conscious decision. I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of what I believe. I'm going to take a step back so I'm not quite so radical. I'm going to lower my standards just a little bit to try and find somebody. And then one day, years after making this decision, living it out, she was at a work party and she met a guy. And this guy, in her words, was the total package. He was good looking, he was well dressed, he was funny. She knew how far along he was so early in his career, so she knew he must make a lot of money. And on top of all that, and being engaged in conversation, he, in their first conversation, brought up how important it was to him to marry someone whose faith was central to their lives. In the course of their conversation, he asked her out, and they set a time to go out. But before that happened, a day or two later, she was at her mom's house having like a cup of coffee, and she said, Mom, I got to tell you about this guy I met. He's the total package, and she's going on. And her mom is all too aware of the choices her daughter had been making for the previous 4, 6, 8 years. And so she patiently listened, but when her daughter finished the story, she said, what do you think? And her mom looked at her with compassion and said, there's only one problem. A guy like that isn't looking for a girl like you. And in sharing the story, the younger girl said she wasn't mad at her mom because she knew her mom was exactly right. Are you the person that the person you're looking for is looking for? And some of you are thinking of sacrificing. And maybe you've kept yourself pure. You've held up certain standards, maybe just one or two of you in this room. And I want you to know that there are a lot of people, married people in this room. There are a lot of divorced people in this room who, if they could, would grab your face and hold it close to theirs and say, please don't sacrifice. Don't sacrifice what you're looking for. Don't sacrifice who you're becoming. It's not worth it. Married people. Some of you during this message have been thinking, yeah, preach it, Carl. Person sitting next to me needs to hear this. My spouse needs to become a person of character. Keep on going. And can I just point out that if you're thinking that, you're exhibiting the exact problem I'm counseling single people not to have. The whole point is that you don't think about what your spouse needs to get right. You think about what you need to get right. Because you went through dating looking for the right person, and it always focused on them. And so if you have a problem, they need to change. If you discover a character flaw, they need to fix that. And if you have relationships problems, it's their fault. But that doesn't work. It's a cycle of pointing fingers and blame and guilt and bitterness. So even as you're married, you need to focus on becoming the person that the person you're married to wants to be married to. Am I the person that the person I'm looking for is looking for? Tommy Nelson says, here's how you find a mate. You run towards God. And after running for a little while, you look to your right and to your left and see who's running next to you. And then you keep running. And then a little while later, you look to your right and to your left, and if you see the same person, you say, hey, you want to run together? The way you find the right person is you be the right person. And that's why the Bible doesn't really give advice on how to find the right person, but it is full of wisdom on how to become the right person. Next week, we're going to talk about how to develop intimacy in relationships. But before you get there, what's your caruso? What's your character? What's being etched on your soul? Am I the person I'm looking for is looking for? Now, the truth is, none of us has followed Jesus like we wish we had. None of us. We all fall short. And that's why Jesus offers grace. See, when Jesus chose to die on the cross, he knew you'd be impure. He knew you'd be selfish. He knew you would disrespect your mate before you ever met him or even after you were married to her. And he died for you anyway. And when he did that, he took his sin, your sin, your selfishness upon him, and he places his perfection on you. And that's why we celebrate Easter so big every year, and that's why we celebrate communion every week, because on the cross is where we become pure. So in just a minute, there's going to be a tray passed down your row. It'll have a stack of 2 cups. One cup has a cracker representing Jesus' body. One has some juice representing Jesus' blood. And we want you to take a stack of those and eat and drink anytime during the band playing. But before we get into that, before we celebrate communion and have the band play, I want to show you that this isn't just something the Bible talked about thousands of years ago. This isn't just something that Carl can put together a talk on. This is something that's happening in our community right now. So Brittany Davila is going to come up, and she's going to share her story. She shared it at membership group this Wednesday, and I asked if she'd be willing to share it today.
Hello, everybody. I started coming to Mosaic about 3 months ago. Before that, I had basically been agnostic, kind of questioning my belief. When I was younger, my family was traditional Catholic, and they would take us to a traditional Catholic church until I reached 7. When I was 7 years old, my grandfather passed away from lung cancer. And I think from that point on, my mom kind of struggled with her faith and her belief. And we got pulled out of the church. My father had always been atheist. He never went to church with us. So over the years, God and religion sort of fell to the back of my mind. I would kind of only call on God when things were tough. I'd ask, why me? Why is this happening to me? And I questioned his existence mostly. And I questioned the point of life and what purpose I had on this planet. And I kind of got consumed by negativity. In middle school, I developed social anxiety and depression, which I still struggle with today. And my parents grew apart and divorced when I was 17, and I felt this terrible void in my heart. Life was sort of turning out to be something very different than what I had expected. So I started looking for love in all the wrong places when I guess it started probably high school. I wanted so desperately to be loved and protected and to feel like I belonged. So after many, many failed relationships where others hurt me and relationships where I hurt others, I started to feel like maybe I was missing something deeper. So most recently I got out of the most poisonous relationship that I've ever been involved in. I was with somebody who made me believe that I was the love of his life. And he turned out to be cheating on me and lying to me almost the entire time we were together. And I actually only found out by talking to the girl he was cheating on me with. So I ended that relationship in October and felt very lost and broken and feeling pretty hopeless about love and life from that point. I was seeing a therapist, wasn't really getting anywhere. I sought guidance from my friends and family and didn't feel like it was accomplishing anything. I was taking antidepressant medication and wasn't really getting anywhere. I just felt very empty inside. So one day, I hopped on Google and did a search for local churches because I thought that might be what I was missing in my life. And I found Mosaic and really liked their message of church for people who don't go to church. It's kind of less intimidating for somebody who's used to Catholicism. Sorry if I offended anybody just now. Anyway, the first service I attended was week 1 of Carl's How to Hug a Vampire series, and it brought me to tears. And I've actually cried every communion since. So I really felt something in that hollow space inside me. And for the first time, I felt a true connection with God. I realized I had been trying for so long to find something in man that only God could give me. And I think it's kind of ironic that bad experiences with the wrong people ultimately helped me find my faith in God. And now it's God who's every day helping me rebuild my faith in man. Thank you.
You can get that to them. Thanks, Brendan. See, here's what we want you to know today. It's never too late to turn back. If you're dirty, if you've messed up, but you want grace, this is where you get it. Jesus is where you get it. You may say, Carl, I'm not a person of character, man. I got some stories I could tell you. But what if many years from now, you could say to your spouse, you know, I went to church this one day, and I encountered grace, and everything changed. A lot of the married people and the divorced people wish they'd heard this message a long time ago. But wherever you are, it's never too late. Decide today that you will love Jesus and let him make you clean. And then through his grace, he will turn you into the person that the person you're looking for is looking for. It all starts by you being clean and receiving grace. Let's pray. God, we sang earlier about how your love never runs out on me, and that's easy to sing. Sometimes it's hard to accept in certain parts of our lives. God, we're broken. We're dirty. We are impure. God, we need grace. God, we don't deserve it. And we feel like many of us have thrown away our future, or the future we had dreamed. But God, we know that you make all things new. You wash us white as snow, and you make us pure. God, thank you for grace. Thank you for Easter, which shows us that the cross can be believed. We run to you now, God. It's in Jesus' name we pray, amen.